Oh, hi, and welcome to SABnessful, where I give my opinions that
no one really cares about,
but will give anyways. Today, I'm analyzing Solo Leveling: Arise from the Shadow, aka Season 2. As a whole, I did not like Season 2 from a story perspective. It left a lot to be desired, and honestly, I'm kind of concerned where the story is headed, which I'll get into all of that soon enough. If you don't want to hear me recapping the season and instead just want to hear my opinions, you can go to this timestamp here, but my opinions will contain spoilers. But before skipping or not skipping ahead, make sure to caress that subscribe button to help my channel grow. And also like and comment, blah, blah, blah. That's really important too. I could actually really use it, but you know what? I don't want to bother you too much since you're already listening to me, and I just don't want to be a bother to anybody. Enough said, let's extract information from Solo Leveling Season 2. Spoilers abound! Oh, I forgot that. Because there are 13 episodes, I'm just gonna go over the main beats and primarily just go over what happens to the protagonist. In episode 1, we see our protagonist Jinwoo Sung get trapped in a red gated dungeon, which is different from the other ones as no one can leave or enter the dungeon until the boss is defeated, and the boss is typically ranked above what the dungeon is, which in this case the dungeon was just supposed to be C ranked. And a quick reminder for the dungeon hunter rankings, E is the weakest and it goes up to D, C, B, and A, with S above A and S being the strongest. Anyways, while in the dungeon, Jinwoo tests out his necromancy skills, which he got at the end of season 1, which allows him to summon the shadows of anyone or thing killed and use them in combat. In episode 2, Jinwoo faces off against the dungeon's boss, and while talking to him, he learns a bit more about the demons, that they all hear a voice telling them to kill humans, but they don't hear that voice when it comes to Jinwoo. The demon then glitches before he can reveal any more information. Jinwoo easily kills the boss and also kills an A-ranked hunter who tried to attack him. Jinwoo extracts the hunter's shadow, but wasn't able to extract the boss's shadow for some reason. In episode 3, we see Jinwoo in his personal dungeon, which has 100 floors he needs to clear, and if he does, he'll get the elixir of life, which he can use to save his mother, who suffers from eternal slumber, a disease preventing her from waking up. In episode 4, Jinwoo decides to get his rankings rescanned so he'll be allowed to go into harder dungeons and gets more money, as on paper, Jinwoo is only ranked as E. But due to his leveling up abilities, he's definitely a lot higher. So high that the scanner gets shy and can't scan him, which means he must be S rank. Several other S rank hunters hear about this and try to recruit Jinwoo into their guild, but Jinwoo has entered his bad bitch era and has no interest in joining. Later on, Jinwoo joins a mining team so he can enter an A rank dungeon since he's not publicly S rank yet. At one point, all the miners leave for lunch break, and Jinwoo uses this as an opportunity to check out the A rank boss. But before he can, he's confronted by S rank hunter Haein Cha. Episode 5 starts with Haein telling him to leave the area, and as he does so, she gets a great big whiff of his wonderful smell. Haein has a heightened sense of smell, and to her, all the hunters smell badly, except for Jinwoo. This makes her interested in him, which will completely sideline her character. The next day, Jinwoo is recruited to be the strike team's equipment carrier in the A dungeon. Though they don't know he's S rank, they think he's just E. After some fighting, the team realize that the demons are a lot stronger than expected, and they decide to exit to recruit more hunters. However, a magical barrier created by the dungeon boss prevents them from leaving, and they have no choice but to confront the boss. Episode 6 starts with Haein outside the gates to the dungeon the strike team are in. Upon hearing that Jinwoo joined the strike team as a carrier, she decides to enter to investigate what he's up to. But since she's off duty, she doesn't have any weapons, so she grabs a pickaxe just in case. We then see the strike team face the boss, and their captain gets his ass kicked. Only when the captain is on the brink of death does Jinwoo decide to step in and face the boss himself. Jinwoo summons his shadows and a battle breaks out, and the rest of the strike team literally stand off to the side and do nothing. Oh, and at one point Haein shows up, but she also literally does nothing. Anyways, Jinwoo once again easily defeats the boss and is able to extract his shadow. After the battle, Jinwoo exits the dungeon and Haein tries to talk to him, but one of the strike team members asks her why she has a pickaxe, and ooh woo, she gets embarrassed and wonders if Jinwoo thought she was weird. Love it when they do this to female characters. In episode 7, Jinwoo's S rank status is publicly released, and with the money he gains from being on the mining team, he buys equipment and heads back into his personal dungeon to finally clear it. We see Jinwoo easily clearing the floors, but once he gets to the 80th one, he notices that many of his shadows are being taken out. He investigates and realizes these demons are very intelligent and confronts them himself, and once again he easily defeats them with just one left standing. Episode 8 starts with Jinwoo fighting the last demon, but before he gives the final blow, they surrender. And oh, for the first time we're introduced to a female demon. Finally. And she's from the 80th floor, so she must be super strong. Oh, she's a total wuss and is completely, utterly, pathetically useless?
Lovely.
Anyways, Jinwoo strikes a deal with her that he won't kill her and her family as long as she shows him how to get to each of the next floors. Oh, and while talking to Essel, her name's Essel by the way, he learns more information about the demons. He learns that the demons are from the demon realm, and one day they found themselves scattered across various dungeons with a voice telling them what to do, which in Essel's case she's told to protect the place she's in. She then glitches and mentions that while in the demon realm, they are preparing for war against an enemy so strong that all demon kind had to be united against them. She then glitches again and says something about exceeding the permitted amount of information and goes back to normal. Moving on, Essel tags along with Jinwoo as he clears the other floors, and she literally does nothing despite being from floor 80. Anyways, lots of fighting and Jinwoo clears the 100th floor. I should also mention the side plot in this episode since it's really important later. In this episode, we see one of the ants from the S dungeon that's broke on Jeju Island fly to a neighboring island and kill a bunch of people. This forces the hunters in Korea to plan a fourth raid on Jeju and seek the help from hunters in Japan, who agreed to send over 10 S-rank hunters to aid in the raid. In episode 9, as a result of clearing the 100th floor, Jinwoo finally gets the elixir of life. Ooh, 6 of them. Jinwoo goes to the hospital and uses the elixir on his mother, which cures her from eternal slumber. Later on, we see Jinwoo watching the Korean S-hunters training for the upcoming raid, and we get to see all 10 of the Japanese S-hunters, which don't get attached to literally any of them. Episode 10 opens up with some of the Korean and Japanese hunters facing off in a training exercise, which is pretty much all the character developments we're going to get with the Japanese hunters. At one point, Jinwoo faces off against Goto Ryuji, the strongest hunter from Japan, and they kind of stalemate. We then get a ton of awesome shots of dozens of hunters preparing for the raid and ready to go to battle, which most of them will once again do nothing. See a trend here? Oh, and Jinwoo isn't joining the raid because he just wants to be with his family. Anyways, the raid commences and the Japanese S-hunters spread out in groups to draw most of the ants away from the nest, while the Korean S-hunters invade the nest to kill the queen, which will prevent any more ants from being created. We see one of the Japanese teams doing pretty good, but then the episode ends with one of them getting beheaded. Oh, shit's about to get real. Episode 11 starts immediately where episode 10 left off, with the 2 other hunters in shock. So looking forward to seeing their fighting ability. Oh, they both get killed immediately? Well, that's fine because 2 more Japanese hunters come over and oh, they also get immediately killed off screen. Okay, that's fine because 3 more Japanese hunters show. Oh, one of them gets killed immediately and one of them runs off and we don't even see Goto facing off the demon who also gets killed off screen. What? You're bringing 10 of the best hunters from Japan and we don't even get to see them fight? Are you kidding me? Whatever, it's fine because we'll get to see the Korean S-hunters fight, right?
Right?
We actually do get to see them fighting off some of the ants and get to see them work together to kill the Ant Queen, which honestly wasn't a lot, but that's all we're going to get because the Ant King shows up. Which, by the way, the demon killing all the Japanese hunters was the Ant King Beru, which technically isn't his name, but I honestly don't feel like repeatedly saying the Ant King. He shows up and completely wrecks the Korean hunters with a very good song playing in the background. He doesn't kill any of them though. I guess he just hates Japanese people. Well, actually, he does kill the S-ranked healer Min Byung-gyu, which this guy stupidly gloated about. It then looks like Beru is going to kill them off, but then leaves for plot reasons. It's the fight to Goto, which we don't even see. Episode 12 starts with Jinwoo finally showing up to the island. Way to take your time there. He then heals the Korean hunters with healing potions, and he tries to use one on Haein, but gets denied. He then fights Beru while the Korean hunters do, drumroll, nothing. And this fight pretty much lasts the whole episode, and not gonna lie, it's pretty epically animated. And Jinwoo pretty easily defeats Beru. He then tries to use one of the elixir of life potions on Haein, which also gets denied. Haein, I guess. Jinwoo then frantically tries to think of what to do next. Finally, in episode 13, Jinwoo extracts Min's shadow, and without even being ordered to, Min heals Haein. Jinwoo then releases Min's shadow since Min hated fighting in battle, which would be a touchy moment
if I cared.
The remaining ants then attack the ships nearby, and we finally get to see the other hunters in battle. But it's only a couple shots because guess what? Jinwoo comes in to save the day. Yay. He extracts the Ant King's shadow and names him Beru. That's where the name comes from, and uses him to take out the remaining ants. Time passes and everyone reflects on those lost. Well, the Korean casualties, that is, because fuck the Japanese hunters. We see Jinwoo telling the chairman of the Korean Hunter Association that he wants to start his own guild. And the episode ends with Jinwoo entering a B dungeon by himself, which turns red, but we all know he's going to be fine. And that's season 2 of solo leveling. On to my likes. I like the concept of solo leveling in that you have these dungeons that randomly started popping up and people are waking up and discovering they have magical abilities and are hunters. I like how it blends fantasy with modern society, and I think the show does a great job at that. I also like the mystery of the dungeons. No one knows why they started showing up, and throughout season 2 we get little clues as to what's going on. And I'm excited to see where the story goes with that. Based off of what we've been given so far, my guess is that the demons are being controlled against their will and forced to kill humans and probably don't even want to. And I'm hoping that's the case because that would create an interesting moral dilemma. Essentially, the demons are victims, but in order to protect humans, you have to kill them. And I hope we get to see the hunters dealing with that dilemma. The animation is also very well done and the fight choreography is very good, which I think those aspects are why people love the show so much. Oh, and the soundtrack? Mwah. And Jinu's powers are admittedly cool, even if they are overpowered. It is pretty epic that he can steal the shadows of those killed and use them for his own objectives. And my understanding is that it's just their shadows and not their souls, though it would be pretty interesting if it was their souls and would make Jinu a more morally gray character. And maybe the story will later on reveal to us that that is the case and Jinu will have to grip with that, which I'd love to see. I also really like a lot of the side characters. When done well, I really like big casts, which Solo Leveling has that, and I would say the first half of the season does a good job at developing them. Honestly, my favorite scenes were pretty much everything not including Jinwoo. I enjoyed seeing the S-Hunters trying to figure out who Jinwoo is and reacting to his power. I also like seeing them learn how dangerous the ants from Jeju Islands have become, and really like seeing them plan the next raid, and also liked all the shots of the hunters preparing for the raid. Seeing all the hunters, especially those from season 1, getting ready hyped me up so much for the upcoming battle, and boy was I let down. But I'll get to that later. In terms of my favorite character, I'd have to say it's Yoon Ho Bak, one of the Korean S-Hunters. I really liked what this season did with him, showing how he was affected by the previous failed raids on Jeju and trying to cope with that. He also clearly cares about the hunters in his guild. When he found out that some of his hunters were trapped in a Red Gate dungeon, he stood outside and refused to leave till the hunters came out. He's a pretty cool dude who's also a badass with a personality, unlike somebody else, which brings me to my dislikes. To me, the show's biggest problem is the protagonist, Jinwoo, who's also my least favorite character. He is the ultimate sin a character could be. Boring. He has no personality, nothing unique about him outside his powers, very dull looking, and I'd just rather see literally any other character on my screen. And I know that some people may think he's cool because he just shows up to battle and doesn't even make a sweat and is a complete badass, but that's boring. I'm bored. And he could still be those things and have a personality. Like literally anything, please. He just gives nothing in that department. And he could easily be an interesting morally gray character. He's killed hunters and even taking their shadows. And yes, there is a tiny bit of him reflecting on that, but it's not really explored. What's a shame about that too is that in season 1, Jinwoo actually did have a personality and even lost some of his fights, but season 2 kind of does away with that. And this is a good place to say that I really enjoy season 1. I really like the storytelling and there's nothing I change about it, and all my dislikes stem from season 2. And back to season 2's story, I really think it put itself in a corner by having Jinwoo be so powerful. Since he easily defeats any opponents, there's just no stakes in any of the fights because we know Jinwoo is easily going to win. And I also think the story made a bad call by having Beru being so powerful. Beru. I feel like I said too many times and now it's weird. It's only season 2 and we were introduced to a demon that took out over a dozen S-Hunters in seconds. And I understand that by doing this, it shows how strong an opponent Beru is, which could have worked if we actually saw Jinwoo struggling against him and barely defeating him, but that didn't happen. The bigger issue is that since they set the tone for how strong Jinwoo is by defeating Beru, any future opponents would have to be even stronger to build stakes, which pretty much nullifies all the other hunters. Speaking of which, I hated how easily the S-Hunters were defeated and how useless they were. And since future opponents introduced will have to be stronger than Beru, they're just going to continue being useless. And that's what worries me for where the show is headed. I don't want to see Jinwoo continue to be a one-man army, which the story clearly likes him being. Seeing one character defeating enemies by themselves is not interesting. A battle is epic because you have multiple parties involved and lots of characters fighting, and the stakes are that any of the characters fighting could be killed. But when it's just one overpowered character, the stakes are a lot lower. And yes, we did see a lot of characters die, but it's also boring when the fight is one-sided and not impactful when I don't care about those killed. We didn't get any development with the Japanese hunters, and Min was a walking death flag. And I have to say this, and I know there's been a lot of debate about it, but Beru beheading the Japanese hunters and not doing the same to the Korean ones was stupid. The plot armor was really thick there, and I hated it. And look, I haven't read the manhwa, and I know that people have said that Beru was torturing them to find the healer and was torturing them for killing the queen, which isn't clear through the anime, so that's a problem. And even if it was clear, it's still thick plot armor and annoying. And the Jeju Island raid, which is something we've been building towards for 2 seasons, was kind of a letdown. I was expecting a huge battle with all the hunters we've met from the first 2 seasons, and they were there. And sure, Jinwoo's fights with Beru was good from an animation perspective, but from a story one, not really. Again, it's not interesting when all but one character is staying off to the side doing nothing. I also really thought we'd get to see the previous failed raids, which I I was really looking forward to, but we didn't get that. Throughout both seasons, we get little snippets of the failed raids, but not the whole picture. And I think it was a missed opportunity that we didn't get that. But what I hated the most, which is a very common anime trope, were the weak female characters. I hate this so much. God forbid we get one strong non-background female character who isn't useless or a coward, and we actually see fighting and their main trait isn't falling for their protagonist. Heian could be such an interesting character, but the second they showed her wooing, and gosh, I hope I don't embarrass myself, I knew her character was going to be a disappointment. And don't even get me started on Essel. Holy shit, what a waste her character was. The first and only female demon we've seen so far, and that's what they did with her? Honestly pathetic. Which brings me to my how I changed section. Now is the time where I try to fix all the issues I've laid out. Though I must work with what I got, so everything must still be contained in 13 episodes, and I must still keep major plot points, like Jinryu curing his mother and successfully defeating the ants on Jeju Island. But other things will be cut to make room for my changes, which I'll go over. Anything I don't mention though will be staying the same. And I want to reiterate that my changes are solely based on the anime, not the manhwa. It's possible that a lot of my issues are done differently in the manhwa, which again I haven't read. For this creative exercise, I'm just focusing on making the anime stronger. And these are my opinions. I'm not saying my changes are inherently better. I'm literally just some random nobody with no experience in the actual field. This is just how I would do it. Moving along. My objectives for my changes are: 1. Make Jinryu actually interesting. I'll be scrapping a lot of his nonchalant behavior because that's boring. 2. Not have the female characters be useless and wooing. I really hate this trope in anime. 3. I want to include the hunters more in the Jeju raid and not have them be useless and just staying off to the side. Which also ties into 4. Not have Jinryu be so overpowered. He's going to struggle a bit. And 5. I should have done this way. I want to try to develop the Japanese hunters and Min more so we actually care when they die. Enough said, this is how I changed Solo Leveling Season 2. To start, I need to make cuts, and it makes the most sense to cut to the Red Gate storyline. It was a fine arc, but there's more interesting things I want to include, and the only thing of importance we get is the boss telling Jinryu about the voice they hear, but I can easily put that somewhere else. And with the season ending with Jinryu going to a Red Gates and how they work can be explained then and in Season 3. Assuming Season 3 starts there, and yes, he won't have the polar bear shadows, but he already has plenty of shadows, and yes, we won't get him killing a hunter and taking his shadow. Here that is. With me cutting the Red Gate storyline, that basically gives me 2 free episodes I can use later, and everything else is going to move up. Episode 1 will start the same with Jinryu talking to his sister's teacher and still talk to Son Yi-han about dropping out of school to be a hunter, but instead of taking her to the gate that eventually turns red, he has her join him and his friend Jinhoo Yu, which happens right after the Red Gate storyline. So episode 3 is now episode 1. But since I'm still keeping the first few minutes of episode 1, I do have to trim some of the original episode 3. So I'll condense a bit of the dialogue from Jinwoo and Jinhoo eating together and Jinhoo talking to his dad. And I won't play the intro song in the first episode, which a lot of season openers don't do anyways. The story would then play out the same with episode 4 becoming episode 2 and episode 5 becoming episode 3. You following? And I'm not really changing anything in those episodes. The one thing I'll tweak is that I'll have Jinryu only use his shadows while alone, and not when he's with Jinhoo because he wants to keep it a secret for now. And I will be changing how Jinryu's shadows work, which I will get into in my new episode 4, which will be what episode 6 was, with Jinryu and the strike team facing the dungeon. And everything will play out the same up to that point, with one exception. In the beginning of my new episode 5, instead of Jinryu smelling good to Heian, I'll have him not have a smell at all, which makes her suspicious of him. Back to the dungeon, instead of Jinryu waiting till the captain's on the brink of death, Jinryu will step in a lot sooner and summon his shadows. The shadows will start fighting the demons, and this gives the rest of the strike team the courage to fight as well, instead of just staying off to the side. And things seem to be going well. The shadows and hunters are defeating the demons, Jinryu is taking care of the boss's 4 bodyguards with the captain assisting him, and Jinryu even admires how powerful he's become. But then things take a dark turn. Suddenly, one of Jinryu's shadows attacks and kills the captain, leaving Jinryu in shock, but none of the other hunters see this. This is where I'm changing how Jinryu's shadows work. Originally, Jinryu just tells them what to do and they do it, and though in my version he can still do that, what I'm changing is that his shadows are unable to tell the difference between ally and foe. Their order is to attack the enemy, but they don't understand who that is. This is something that Jinryu didn't realize since he only used his shadows when he was alone. They are still demons too, so it could be they still hear a voice telling them to kill humans, and Jinryu isn't able to fully override that. Which Jinryu doesn't know that yet, but that'll come up later. This now creates a limitation with Jinryu so he's not so overpowered. And this humbles Jinryu as he realizes he's not as in control as he thought. Having the captain die here is now a consequence of Jinryu being too confident. That said, I do kind of miss him intentionally killing the aiming hunter to use his shadow. That's definitely a lot darker for Jinryu, but for where I'm taking the story, it makes more sense to do this instead. Anyways, he now has to figure out how to stop his shadows from killing the other hunters. hunters. He looks over and sees the shadows approaching the hunters, and he unsummons those closest to them, but this distraction gives the boss's bodyguards an opening and they land a blow on Jinwoo. Things are looking pretty dire as Jinwoo is on his toes, and with some of the shadows gone, the hunters are overwhelmed. But then comes Haein to save the day. Even with just a pickaxe, she shows how strong she is and takes out the demons near the hunters. I'll then have Jinwoo get a notification to extract the captain's shadow, and out of desperation, he does. Jinwoo gets back on his feet and he throws Haein a weapon. He has a ton of them. And with Haein helping, he doesn't have to use as many shadows and can just focus on the boss and his bodyguards, which he defeats and extracts once the fight is over. The hunters then gather around the captain's body, and Jinwoo lies about what happened to him, saying one of the bodyguards killed him. The Hunter Association people show up and the episode pretty much plays out the same from there. But I am absolutely cutting Haein's whole ooh woo thing, and now again have her be suspicious of Jinwoo, not fully believing him about how the captain died. So yes, Haein is no longer crushing on Jinwoo. I do understand that him smelling good to her might mean that he's her soulmate or something like that, instead of just him smelling good to her because he's so powerful, which is how I'm interpreting it. Either way, I don't care. I hate that plot point for her, so now it's gone. That said, in later seasons, she could still fall in love with Jinwoo, but now it's no longer her defining trait. Moving on to episode 5, which will be what episode 7 was, where Jinwoo's S-rank status is publicly released. However, I have this episode start with Jinwoo reflecting on killing the captain and realizing he's not as powerful as he thought, and he decides to use his personal dungeon as practice for controlling his shadows. To make room for this, I'm cutting the character Min-Sung Lee out of the season. That whole scene with him went nowhere this season, so I'm okay cutting him. And I know it's possible he'll play a more important role further down in the story, so I'll have him be reintroduced in my Mythical Season 3. Everything else will play out the same. Moving on to episode 6, which will be what H was, where we meet Essel. And you know I'm changing her character. Basically, I'll just not make her a wimp and useless. She can still surrender, but does this because she knows she can't defeat Jinwoo, and can even be the one to suggest to him that she'll show him how to get to the next floors, as long as he doesn't kill her and her family, which he agrees to. I'll still have her mention everything about the demon realm, and I'll add here how the other demons hear a voice telling them to kill humans, but not when it comes to Jinwoo, which is the info we lost when I cut the Red Gate storyline. Upon hearing this makes Jinwoo wonder if that's why his shadows attack the hunters, and he wonders if the captain's shadow will do the same. He summons the captain and asks Essel if he'll be different than the other shadows, but she doesn't know. He'll then see the option to release the shadow, which he didn't know he could do till that point, but he keeps the captain just in case. I'll then have Jinwoo and Essel make their way through each floor and have them both, yes both, be fighting together, which is actually in Jinwoo's favor because he can now practice keeping the shadows from attacking Essel, which he succeeds at. However, because she's a demon, he's unsure if he was successfully controlling his shadows or they just didn't attack her because they didn't hear a voice telling them to. Anyways, they eventually clear all 100 floors, and the side plots of the S-Hunters playing the next Jeju raid will be staying as is. Moving on to episode 7, this will be what episode 9 was, where Jinwoo gives his mother the elixir of life, though I'll be rearranging some things. First, I'll be cutting the scene with Chairman Go and Jincho Woo talking through the end of the episode where we meet the Japanese hunters. I'm not scrapping those scenes, I'm just moving them to a different episode. This episode will start the same all the way through till we get to the scene with Min and Bak eating together. I'm going to remove the scene temporarily and move up the scene with Jinwoo using the elixir on his mother. Instead of the press conference happening after this, I'll have the scene of Jinwoo's mom returning home. Then after this, I'll place back in the scene with Min and Bak, and then have the press conference scene, which ends with a flashback of Min, Bak, and Eun-Seok together before the third Jeju raid where Eun-Seok dies. And I'm actually going to extend this scene, and for the rest of the episode, I'll have the three of them, along with other hunters, preparing for the third raid and being very hopeful. Then with episode 8, I'll use one of my free episodes to show the third raid, and that's the only thing that will happen in this episode. We'll get to see all the S-Hunters that participated in that raid. This is great because we now get to see these hunters in action and learn more about them, and how things seem to go well till they don't. We see the hunters get overwhelmed, and we see exactly how Eun-Seok dies, with the episode ending with the surviving hunters coping with their defeat and those lost. Showing this helps raise the stakes for the fourth raid because we now know how strong the ants are, and we have a better understanding of the S-Hunters' motivation. We saw them lose, so now we get to try to see them redeem themselves. Plus, this also develops Min more, and we get to see more of the trio together, which will make Min's eventual death more tragic and impactful. Moving on to my episode 9. I'll start with the scenes I cut out earlier, those being the scenes of Chairman Go and Jincho Woo talking and meeting the Japanese hunters. Though when the Japanese hunters are introduced, I'll be adding some exposition, which is kind of lazy, but I'm on a time restraint, so it's the best I can do. Anyways, instead of just wide shots of all of them, I'll add a montage where we get close-up shots of each one of them and shots of them each in battle, which will be voice-overed with Go explaining to Jinwoo who each of them are. This way we get to know more about them and see their abilities. And my episode 9 will basically be what episode 10 was. And we'll go right into the training exercise of the Korean and Japanese hunters facing off, all the way through Jinwoo and Goto sparring. Though here I'll be slightly changing Jinwoo's motivation. He still does this to test his strength, but he's more seeing how much he can hold on his own, since he knows his shadows might not be as reliable as he thought. The episode continues playing out the same till we get to Jinwoo eating at home. This is where we learn that Jinwoo isn't joining the raids because he wants to stay at home and help his mother, but I'll add here the bigger reason, which is he doesn't have complete control of his shadows yet, and he doesn't want to risk anyone getting hurt. After this scene is when we see the Ant King Beru being born, which I'm keeping this scene, but I'll move it towards the end of the episode, and everything after this will be pushed to my episode 10.
Still following?
And what I'll add to make up the gap are scenes of the Korean and Japanese hunters interacting. They could be training together, they could be eating together, they could be strategizing together, literally anything that shows more of the Japanese hunters so we get a better sense of their personalities. Then episode 9 ends with Beru being born, which I think is a great ominous way to end the episode. My episode 10 is where I'll use my other free episode, and here I'm not creating a new storyline like showing the 3rd raid. Instead, I'll be extending a lot of scenes in the 4th raid, and this free episode will allow me to do that. So episode 10 starts with what I took from the previous episode, which is all the hunters gathering together and preparing for the raid, and the raid commencing, and with this Japanese hunter getting beheaded, which is no longer a cliffhanger, going straight into what was episode 11, with the remaining 2 hunters fighting Beru. And I'll actually be nerfing Beru to some degree. He's still going to be very powerful, but he's not going to be able to defeat the hunters in one blow. So with Beru facing off against these 2 hunters, I will extend the scene and actually have them put up a fight, which will last for a couple minutes. But because it's just the 2 of them, they ultimately both get killed. Fast forward to these other 2 Japanese hunters showing up. Again, I'll be extending this scene and have them fight Beru, but they both will ultimately be killed, and we will actually see that. With 5 S hunters taken out, this allows the ants to be able to head off the island, and we now see the hunters on the boats fighting the ants, and I'll be adding a lot more shots of that than what we originally got. Fast forward, and we see the Korean hunters taking out the queen, and the episode ends with Beru showing up. Now to my episode 11, it'll start with the Korean hunters fighting Beru, though I will have them be able to hold their own against him for a little bit. And with there being 5 hunters instead of just 2, this explains why they are not killed unlike the Japanese hunters, and also because they have a healer. Not for long though. Anyways, as they're fighting, I'll have other ants join in as well, and with the combination of Beru and the other ants, the Korean hunters are too overwhelmed, which allows Beru to be able to get the upper hand and take them out. While that is going on, I'll add in shots of Jinwoo watching the battle unfold. Because he attached shadows to 5 of the Korean hunters, he's able to witness what's going on with them. Oh, wait a second. I just realized he didn't attach a shadow to Min, so that could explain why he didn't step in before Min was killed, because he didn't know Min was about to be killed. But then, like, how much can he see with his shadows? Whatever, for my sake, he's still gonna be able to see everything, even if he's not attached to Min. Anyways, at first he believes they can take Beru, but as he sees them getting taken out, he starts pondering if he should join, but is hesitant because he knows he can't completely control his shadows, which he can control enough to surveillance. It's when his shadows are in fight mode he can't control them. However, once Min is killed, he realizes he took too long to decide and immediately enters the battle. Once he enters, he is able to surprise attack Beru and knock him away from the others. Jinwoo then summons his shadows to start taking out the ants, and with Beru out of the way, for now, Jinwoo is able to keep his shadows from killing the others. He also uses this time to heal them, but once again can't with Heian. Now at this point you may realize I haven't included the scene of Beru attacking Goto's team, and that's because I'm not having that. It just makes more sense for Beru to not leave the nest before killing the Korean hunters. But Goto still needs to die, so what I'll do instead is show his team coming across the dead Japanese hunters and reporting that. And I'll have Goto tell the other 2 hunters that they need to go into the nest, as he suspects whatever killed the other hunters is inside there. Back inside the nest, with Jinwoo being too distracted healing the hunters and keeping the ants at bay and preventing the shadows from killing the hunters, Beru is able to get back up and is ready to fight them again. But as he gets back up, Goto and his team show up as well, and the episode ends with a massive shot of all the hunters surrounding Beru. Episode 12 will start with the newsfeed coming back, showing everyone in the nest with the characters on the mainland reacting to this. Afterwards, we get a few more shots of the hunters fighting on the ships, and will even check in on the remaining Japanese team outside the nest fighting the ants instead of just standing around doing nothing. We then go back into the nest where the rest of the episode will take place. And with Beru getting back up, Jinwoo won't be able to fight him and keep his shadows from killing the hunters. But due to the Japanese team showing up and most of the Korean hunters healed, he doesn't need his shadows anymore. A fight breaks out and I'll have the Korean hunters fight the ants with Jinwoo fighting Beru, but not solo as the Japanese team helps him. This will be a nice long battle with epic animation, and I'll still have Goto and this hunter get killed while fighting Beru, which as a result of Goto getting killed in front of him, this hunter, I really should just be using the names instead of this hunter, but that'd be too many names to keep track of. As a result of witnessing Goto getting killed, Minoru goes into a state of shock and is no longer able to fight, which yes does now make him useless, but he wasn't always useless, and some people react to trauma differently, and I wanted to show that. Plus, that is how he reacts in the original story, so I kind of had to keep that. With the Japanese hunters getting taken out, I'll finally now have Jinwoo fight solo, and kills Beru by himself, but is only able to do so because he and the Japanese hunters were able to weaken him before they were taken out. With Beru killed and the Korean hunters successfully taking out the ants inside the nest, Jinwoo tries to use the elixir on Heian, and the episode ends with it not working. Finally, we've come to episode 13, which will mostly stay the same to the original 13th episode with slight tweaking. I'll start again with Jinwoo extracting Min's shadow and Shadow Min healing Heian and being released, which is now more emotionally impactful because I showed more of him. Fast forward to outside the nest. I'm not going to have Jinwoo easily kill 4,000 ants on his own. Instead, I'll just have there be less ants alive. And we see the hunters on the ship successfully taking out the last of the ants near them, but the ships are damaged and littered with bodies of fallen hunters. I will have a couple ant stragglers still make it to the mainland, but the hunters there are able to take them out on their own. And we even see Juhee being in the middle of the fight healing people, not being as afraid and useless as she once was. At this point, all the ants are taken care of and the hunters are able to leave the island without getting attacked. The episode will play out the same all the way through the end, though I will have Jinwoo be more sullen about what's happened and regrets more about not showing up sooner to save Min. And while he's in the B-Red dungeon, I'll have him look at this as an opportunity to better control his shadows to prevent less death, instead of the dungeon just being an inconvenience. Also with Heian at the end, since I'm not having her crashing on Jinwoo, instead of her saying she wants to stand by his side, she'll say something about how she was suspicious of him, but no longer is given what he did, but still intends on learning more about him and trying to figure out why he doesn't have a scent. And that concludes How I Changed Solo Leveling Season 2. I really tried to add as much development as I could with the characters, and I think weakening both Jinwoo and Beru is good for the future of the story. By having Beru be weaker, it doesn't make the other hunters practically useless, and means they won't be useless for future stronger opponents. Also, weakening Jinwoo and giving him limits means he has somewhere to go in future seasons. He now has something to work and improve on, but is still pretty strong. Also, by having Jinwoo be unable to control his shadow demons, it leaves room for possibilities of morally complex situations that Jinwoo finds himself in. Like, let's say Jinwoo can't prevent his shadow demons from killing other hunters and he has no choice but to extract more shadows from fallen hunters. Maybe we even see him extract the shadows from the fallen Japanese hunters. Or later on in the story, he has to kill hunters so he can use their shadows. Either way, this change means that lots more can be done with his character. And me making him weaker and not as cocky and him actually experiencing fear does make him more interesting to watch. But that pretty much sums it up. Hopefully you were able to keep track of my change section because there were a lot of moving parts, but let me know what you thought of my changes down below in the comments. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.